Welcome to the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Natu. Today we're diving deep into Adam Grant's Think Again. It's all about the power of rethinking, and then we've got Anil's notes right here from his summary of the book. And he does such a great job of really like boiling down the key takeaways.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Grant really challenges us to kind of reconsider how we even approach learning
Hmm.
and how we make decisions. And he makes this point that, in today's world, being able to think again, it's like crucial for success. I mean, in all areas of life, really.
It really is. Yeah, it's not just about, like changing our minds, right? It's about developing a mindset that's way more flexible,
Yeah.
more adaptable. And Anil actually highlights that right away in the 1 Hour Guide. He points out how dangerous it is to like cling to old ideas and how important it is to embrace what Grant calls a scientist mindset.
Right. And he uses that analogy of a scientist, constantly testing their hypotheses and being open to revising their beliefs based on new evidence. He contrasts that with what he calls the preacher, the prosecutor, and the politician mindsets, which tend to be much more rigid. They're really focused on defending existing beliefs.
And that's where we get into trouble, right? I mean, we're so convinced we're right
Yeah.
that we just stop questioning and we stop learning. And Neil brings up a great example in the 1 Hour Guide, the example of BlackBerry,
Hmm.
a real cautionary tale.
Oh, yeah. BlackBerry is a perfect illustration of Grant's point. They were dominant in the smartphone market. But their founder, Mike Lazaridis, he was so sure that physical keyboards were superior that he completely dismissed the rise of touchscreens. He was stuck in that preacher mode, clinging to this belief even when the market was shifting.
It's a stark reminder. I mean, even the most successful people can fall prey to this kind of thinking. And it's not even just individuals. I mean, Anil points out how entire companies and organizations can get stuck in their ways.
Yeah, and that's why Grant emphasizes the importance of building a culture of what he calls constructive conflict. He argues that healthy debate and disagreement, they're absolutely essential for innovation and growth. One of the examples Anil highlights is Pixar. They've created this culture where everyone, no matter what their position is encouraged to offer critiques and to challenge ideas.
It sounds like they've really managed to create that psychological safety where people feel comfortable speaking up without being afraid of getting punished or ridiculed.
Exactly. Psychological safety is crucial. If you want to foster constructive conflict, without it, people are just going to stay silent, even if they have valuable insights.
It makes you wonder how many great ideas are just lost
Yeah.
because people are afraid to speak up. And that kind of brings us to another key takeaway from Think Again and from the 1 Hour Guide. How do we navigate those tough conversations where you, Dio, need to challenge someone's thinking?
Well, Grant suggests that we approach these conversations not as battles to be won, but as a collaborative search for truth. It involves listening carefully, finding common ground, and asking questions that encourage the other person to rethink their position.
Right, and Anil has this great example in the 1 Hour Guide
Yeah.
about this doctor in Quebec who is known as the vaccine whisperer. He was incredibly successful at convincing vaccine-hesitant parents by actually listening to their concerns and building trust rather than arguing with them.
Yeah, it's a brilliant illustration of the power of empathy and understanding when it comes to changing minds. Grant argues that in our world, it's increasingly polarized, and these skills, empathy and understanding, are more important than ever.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that sometimes the best way to convince someone isn't to like bombard them with facts,
Right.
but to actually listen and understand their perspective.
It's true. It's about connecting with people on a human level, which can be tough, especially in those emotionally charged debates that we see all the time these days. Yeah, and that's where that concept of the effective tipping point comes in. Anil highlights it in the 1 Hour Guide. Grant explains how our emotions can kind of hijack a conversation and make it almost impossible to have a productive dialogue.
So how do we even like recognize
No.
when we're hitting that tipping point, and what can we do to like pull back from the brink?
Well, Grant offers a few strategies, like taking a break to cool down, actively listening to the other person's perspective, and focusing on finding common ground. He also talks about framing the conversation in a way that invites dialogue rather than confrontation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Shifting the focus from like winning the argument to actually having a meaningful exchange of ideas.
Exactly. And that actually ties back to the concept of intellectual humility, another central theme in Think Again. Anil dedicates a whole section of the 1 Hour Guide to this.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers
Yeah.
and being open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
Right. Grant argues that intellectual humility is essential for personal growth. and for effective decision-making. He defines it as the ability to acknowledge the limits of our knowledge, to be curious about what we don't know, and to be willing to change our minds when we're presented with new information.
So it's like this delicate balance
Mhm.
between having confidence in our abilities, but also being humble enough to admit when we're wrong.
Exactly. He calls it confident humility, and he suggests that it's a key ingredient for success, especially in today's complex world. He emphasizes that embracing intellectual humility is not about being weak or indecisive. It's about being a lifelong learner, someone who's constantly evolving.
Right. It's about recognizing that the world's changing all the time,
Yeah,
and we need to change with it.
exactly. And that brings us to another important takeaway from Think Again and the 1 Hour Guide, the importance of rethinking our goals and our aspirations.
Yeah, it's easy to get stuck on a certain path, especially if we've invested a lot of time and energy into it. But sometimes we need to step back
Yeah.
and ask ourselves if our goals are still aligned with what we really want.
Grant encourages us to view our lives as journeys, not destinations. It's okay to change course, to try new things, to adjust our goals as we learn and grow,
It's about embracing the unknown and being open to new possibilities.
and recognizing that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the process. Grant encourages us to view setbacks as opportunities for learning and growth, not as signs that we're on the wrong path.
And Anil stresses this point too in the 1 Hour Guide. He talks about how Grant suggests that we can reframe our thinking about failure by adopting what's called a growth mindset.
Right, a growth mindset is the belief that our abilities aren't fixed, but they can be developed through effort and learning. This mindset encourages us to embrace challenges, to persist when we face setbacks, and to view feedback as an opportunity to improve.
Yeah, that sounds like a much more empowering way to approach life than having a fixed mindset, where we think our abilities are just predetermined.
Exactly. Grant argues that developing a growth mindset is essential for navigating the uncertainties of today's world.
So we've talked about rethinking our beliefs, rethinking our conversations, and rethinking our goals. Is there anything else Anil covers in the 1 Hour Guide that we should touch on before we wrap up?
Well, there's one more area Grant explores in Think Again that's particularly relevant, I think, for our listeners, and that's the workplace.
Yeah, because all these ideas about rethinking and adaptability, they're crucial for success in today's work environment.
Right. In the 1 Hour Guide, Anil summarizes Grant's insights on how to create a culture of rethinking within organizations. He highlights the importance of fostering psychological safety, encouraging constructive conflict, and embracing experimentation.
Yeah, those are all essential ingredients for creating a workplace where people feel empowered to share their ideas, challenge the status quo, and learn from their mistakes.
Exactly. Grant argues that these principles aren't just nice to have, they're essential for innovation, for growth, and ultimately for success in the long run.
So what are some practical steps that leaders and organizations can take to actually cultivate this culture of rethinking?
Well, Grant offers several suggestions. First, leaders need to model intellectual humility themselves. They need to be willing to admit when they don't know something, to be open to feedback, and to change their minds when presented with new information.
So it's about leading by example
Yeah.
and creating a culture where it's okay to be wrong.
Exactly. And that leads to the second point, which is creating psychological safety. Employees need to feel safe to speak up, to share their ideas, to challenge the status quo without fear of being punished or ridiculed.
Yeah, it's about creating an environment where people feel respected and valued, even when they disagree.
Right. And finally, organizations need to encourage experimentation and embrace failure as a learning opportunity. Create space for people to try new things, to take risks, and to learn from their mistakes.
So it's about shifting the focus from being right all the time to learning and growing as individuals and as a team.
Exactly. And that's really the essence of Think Again. It's about developing a mindset that embraces change, welcomes challenges, and values continuous learning.
And that's a valuable lesson for all of us, no matter what our role is or what industry we're in.
Absolutely. The principles in Think Again, they can be applied to any area of life where we're trying to improve, to grow, to make better decisions.
Yeah, it seems like Think Again offers like a really powerful framework, not just for our work lives, but for our personal lives too.
Absolutely, it really does. And that's one of the things that makes the book so compelling. It has these insights and strategies that you can apply to like any area of life where you want to, grow and learn and make better decisions.
And Anil really emphasizes that in the 1 Hour Guide. He has all these examples from the book
Hmm.
to show how you can use the principles of Think Again to improve our relationships, our parenting, even our understanding of the world around us.
Yeah, it's all about recognizing that the world is constantly changing, right? And we need to be adaptable if we want to thrive. Grant's argument is that if we cling to outdated beliefs and ways of thinking, it can really hold us back from reaching our full potential.
It's a call to embrace lifelong learning
Right.
and to be open to new ideas, even if they challenge what we already believe.
Exactly. And it's about being willing to admit when we're wrong and to change our minds when we see new evidence.
Which, I mean, sometimes that's tough, right?
Yeah, 'cause
Especially when we put a lot of time and energy into believing something or doing things a certain way.
it can be really challenging. But Grant argues that it's more rewarding in the end to be open to learning and growing than to just be right all the time.
That's a great point. It's about shifting our focus
Yeah.
from being right to being better.
And that's really the heart of Think Again, isn't it? It's about developing a mindset that embraces curiosity, humility, and a willingness to rethink our assumptions.
So it's about becoming more agile thinkers,
Mm-hmm.
more effective communicators, and ultimately more successful individuals.
Precisely. And I think Anil's 1 Hour Guide does a fantastic job of distilling these key insights from the book into a really concise and actionable format.
A great resource for anyone who wants to dive into Think Again and start applying those principles to their own lives.
I couldn't agree more. Whether you're trying to improve your decision-making or navigate tough conversations or just become a more open-minded and adaptable person, Think Again and the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu offer valuable insights and practical strategies that can really help you achieve your goals.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today, but this has been a fascinating deep dive into Think Again. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to check out the 1 Hour Guide website for more business insights from Anil Nathu, including his full deep dive into Think Again.